Okay, the purpose of this video is to continue the discussion about Gerard Hausers' ontology that I began in another video, particularly because I've rethought and revisited the Hauser text and put the pieces together a little bit better. And I'll be discussing some of this in my upper level rhetoric class today, and so these videos are both to publicly put some ideas out here, but also to help me think through some of the thoughts that I'm engaging with in my lectures. So, okay, I've kind of followed the Hauser logical moves a little bit better now, and this quite makes sense to me, and I like it. I like the idea, so it's worth talking about. So we discussed Hausers' ontology, his, say, philosophy of being, his broad, zoomed out conception of how the world works, say his groundwork plan or idea, his basic understanding of how beings and things and matter work and interact in the world. This is what I kind of mean by an ontology here. And for Hauser, there are three primary components of this. There are things which exist. There are events which occur, and there are processes which continue. And the examples he provides are quite nice. I don't know that my examples were quite as succinct in this other video. So he talks about, say, evolution as a process, or the kind of natural, repetitive, predictable elements of the universe. And this is where I brought in the subjectivity and objectivity discussion, because the sciences are often engaged in identifying truths about the world that should be replicable, and they're true because they are replicable, usually. This is kind of our Enlightenment era empirical methodology, but holds true today for much of science. If, observable, whether that's technology assisted or not, observable in some manner, quantitative, measurable, data, parameters, and replicable. So processes, something like, well, what do we know about the way the Earth rotates on its axis? It makes it appear such so that the sun rises every day, rises in the east and sets in the west relative to how we see it. We're also revolving around the sun, and this largely has to do, and then the galaxy that we're in, the arm of the galaxy we're in is spinning around the center of the galaxy, and it appears that galaxies are moving away from each other in clusters. That's about the extent of what we know where we are. But that's all dictated by, say, natural law. Gravity, the interaction of bodies, the interaction of matter in the universe. And that constitutes for Hauser something he calls continuity. And that's quite nice. Humans like continuity, right? We like reliable patterns. We like predictability. We actually experience anxiety when things don't go the way that we assume they're going to. And this is where we kind of adapt. So for Hauser, there's continuity, which is when processes work as they should and we expect them to. And then there's discontinuity in the world, which is when emergent ruptures occur in the expected processes. And let's give a really clear example of that. These are far-reaching. Discontinuities are far-reaching, but something like, this is fun, think about 90s grunge music. It's a new genre of music. The chord progressions, even the style of the chords, we're using really simplified power chords. We're turning up the fuzz, the distortion on the timbre of the electric guitar, the construction of the song, it's verse, chorus, verse. Maybe that's not so broken from what we come to expect in popular music, but say there are stylistic elements that create quite a change. Or you go back in time, Igor Stravinsky's Rites of Spring. Apparently there was a riot that occurred because the music was so, so very different than what was expected. People have a strong reaction to it, and they were flipping over carriages and carrying torches through the streets, or at least this is how the anecdote goes. And it's a Igor Stravinsky, this story is widely used to demonstrate, say, ruptures in musical history. We have political ruptures, right? This is a new thing, this kind of return to the populist movement, we might say, on a global scale, a kind of, it's not what you would predict to have happen. And in my other video, this is really important, and that I laid this out, I think. These are opportunities, say, for when rhetoric should emerge. And for how, this is what Hauser details, is in discontinuity is where rhetoric reemerges, because we have to negotiate with others a new understanding of reality. When there's a rupture in what we expect to occur, when there's a rupture in these processes, something changes. And that's not a negative or positive connotation. It could be an economic collapse, or it could be an economic upswing, new unexpected growth. Nonetheless, it's not in line with what we expect to occur, and so rhetoric emerges as an opportunity to renegotiate what reality is, and to re-understand, and to kind of get our feet planted back on the ground. And this is really important, like I outlined in the other video about Hausers Ontology. This is where, how do I want to frame this? It's in these kinds of moments of uncertainty that rhetoric gives us the ability to navigate complex systems. It's why it is rhetoric, this is why rhetoric is, say, both a method and an art and a mode of thinking. And rhetoric allows us to navigate with what is not perfectly empirical or scientific. Because in the arbitrary world, in the world of human communication, say, or economics, unpredictable things happen, and they happen very frequently. You can't with any certainty predict, using some kind of algorithm or equation, what people are going to say with you, or say to you, or how even you're going to interact with other people. It's very context dependent. It's very contingent upon circumstances. And then for Lloyd Bitzer, who famously published this piece on the rhetorical situation, which was 1968 or 9. This is a cornerstone piece in rhetoric. I should know this. 68 or 69, Lloyd Bitzer publishes the rhetorical situation, and saying that, rhetoric kind of emerges out of these exigencies. So there's a problem in the world, and then discourse emerges, and that helps us influence other people to make some kind of change. And then there are constraints placed upon what we can do based on, say, maybe there's ideological constraints. People have physical constraints, events, objects. There's a limited amount of, perhaps there are limited avenues upon which we can act in the world, say even that there's an extent to what we can do that's legal, or safe, right? There are constraints upon our actions in the world. This is the kind of, context that we talk about. All right, I don't want to go too deep. We'll do maybe another video about Bitzer and the VATS thing, because poor VATS, his response in 1973, his challenge on Bitzer is not particularly widely read. I think people talk about it in rhetoric, and Bitzer isn't a particularly well-read piece outside of academia either, but VATS talks about salience and presence, and for him, and I guess people push against this rightfully so, because it's kind of a social constructivist take on reality, but I don't know. For me, VATS is looking at the significance of subjectivity in framing reality, right? Which is, okay, that's important, because we have we have a subjective position in the world. And I gave this example in class the other day. I held up my thermos here, and I asked, well, what color is this? And this might even appear different to you on camera here because of the way that the data in the video is going to get encoded and then compressed and uploaded and displayed on your monitor. So interesting point here. It's like I asked, is this, what color is it? And someone said blue, and someone said purple, and someone said indigo. Think about that, right? So it's the same object. It's the same object in 3 different perceptions of what it looks like. This is important. We live in these shared spaces where we have to kind of negotiate what is reality. And this is why language and communication are so important, because when I say cat, to me that means a particular cat, but it might mean a different cat to you. And we have to figure out what are these, and this is kind of not asinine but mundane example, but think about in its applications to business or policy and government or legislation. It's like we better have our terms figured out. We better know that we're talking about the same thing and that we have reliable data and that we're making policies that are going to do good for the world. And then, right, we have to talk about what is good. And that's where political divide perhaps comes up, is in our different understanding of what are the ideal circumstances for humans to be living in. And politics needs a lot more philosophy in it. There's not enough philosophy in the political landscape. So debate, and this is important. So we'll say it's discourse is the nice word in academia, discourse. But debate and conversation and the practical time that people spend together hashing out ideas emerges in discontinuity and in disagreement, and ideally people reach some new place of understanding upon which, say, policies can be created. And this doesn't look at say even our presidential debates now, for our candidates in both on the left and the right. The way that they do this on the major television networks is you get 30 seconds or sometimes 10 seconds for a response, or 60 seconds, very, very short time frames to just get a sound bite out there. And you can't really dive deeply into significant ideas in so short a time frame. And so more people are turning to long form communication mechanisms to gather information, and that's particularly why I like YouTube so much, as we see folks like Joe Rogan who are interviewing political candidates for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, and we can really get down to the bottom of ideas. And most people run out of energy doing anything serious after about 2, 3, 4 hours. That seems to be the upper limit of most human ability to stay engaged with an idea, or say to study or read. You notice this yourself likely if you go to the library to study and you're done after about 2 hours or something like that, if even that long. So most humans have a kind of, we can't debate for 3 days straight, is what I'm saying. Constraints. So anyway, these are the logical moves that Hauser does in his Introduction to Rhetorical Theory. He sets up this ontology of things, events, and processes, and then from the concept of processes, when those processes are interrupted, that's when we have discontinuity in the world, and then those are the opportunities for rhetoric to emerge. It's one theory of rhetoric, right? It's one idea about this. It's not all inclusive. It's and Hauser is a respected rhetorician, of course, award-winning professor emeritus from some quite nice university that I can't recall off the top of my head. And has this kind of theory of vernacular rhetoric, but it's just one one way of kind of nicely, succinctly packaging this up. And events are important throughout rhetorical theory since, the late 60s for Bitzer, essentially talking about events in terms of the rhetorical situation, the way I see it. And then in the 80s, too, we have more people talking about events and eventfulness. So that's enough for now. Hope you're having a good day. Take care of yourselves. Have a great week. Really, do something good for the world or good for yourself, or move along on something you're working on. Good luck, everybody.